Yes. Yo. It's time. This one goes out for slickmtz80, doughboiijr. We got the Mickey's 6-pack. Do my damnedest. Chug all this shit right here. Professor, cue the lecture.
Sisyphus was a character in Greek mythology. He was condemned by the gods to a truly pointless task.
Step up.
He had to roll a rock up a mountain, and of course when it got to the top, it would roll down of its own weight, and he would have to do it again, and again, and again, and again. This is a kind of symbol of what Camus refers to famously as the absurd. And he points out in his retelling of the story of Sisyphus that one can't think of anything more absurd than a lifetime filled with futile labor. Now the notion of the absurd is a special notion. It's not particularly technical, but it's important to distinguish it from many of the absurdities we find in life. Silly things happen, ridiculous things happen. One thinks, for example, of a Three Stooges short. But that's not the absurd. The absurd, which Camus says has overtaken modern sensibilities, which is really a kind of obsession with the way we see the world today.
Golf, ace, golf.
The absurd is really a metaphysical thesis.
Don't know.
To put it very bluntly,
don't know what that one is.
It's a confrontation.
Golf ball and a
it's
diamond
a
and a golf
between
ace of diamonds and a golf
the
ball and
rational
a cake.
human mind, the mind that deserves and demands justice, that expects the universe to be comprehensible, and what Camus calls, in a phrase that he borrows straight from The Stranger,
T-card, golf
an
cake.
indifferent universe. The truth is, the world doesn't care. Now you might say that it's part of our human nature, not something we learn from society, but part of our nature itself, that we care about each other, that, as many philosophers have argued, we're born with a sense of compassion or sympathy or pity. And perhaps we're even born with a sense of justice, some sense of fairness, even in small children when they're not treated as they would like to be treated. Without having a choice in the matter, we project this sense on the universe, and we expect the universe to fulfill our demands. We think, for example, that evil should be punished. We think that goodness should be rewarded.
You're a star.
And the problem that goes all the way back to the early Middle Ages, often called the problem of evil, the obvious fact that virtue is not always rewarded.
Yeah, I guess I have to get it close.
Evil sometimes get away with what they do.
You're a star.
Has always been a deep problem.
Let me get the other one up there.
For theological thinkers, but without even reference to religion. It's a problem for all of us.
Step up.
The absurd is this recognition that we have
or maybe
the
it means
of the world, and the
downstairs.
world just doesn't care.
Don't know.
Now in The Stranger, interestingly, Rousseau accepts this. When he opens his heart to the universe,
golf ball and a card and a golf ball and a cake. Somebody help me out with that one.
What he's saying is that the universe itself is indifferent.
Fine malt liquor.
It just is what it is. And he himself has always been, and now on reflection,
already fucked up my timer.
Who he is.
I set a timer so I can
accepts that.
Now there's
a sense in which you might say
it's already fucked up.
The absurd would cease to be a problem if we believe in God. Camus, of course, is an atheist. But the truth is that the absurd would exist even if there's a God. In fact, the problem of evil, as it goes back through history, is very much a problem in the face of God, that we have these expectations and the world doesn't seem to deliver. At one point, Camus says, even if there were a God, it wouldn't matter. Now, in The Stranger, it's often said, and Rousseau says, that it's death that makes life absurd. There's a long soliloquy where he considers his death penalty and the ways in which
Got the
it
same
might
one
be
again.
less absurd, for example, if they gave him a 1 in a million chance to escape.
It's either downstairs or
But the idea that death makes life absurd, which of
Steps
course is
up,
an ancient
step
view
up.
that goes all the way back to the Greeks,
not sure what that's supposed to
is
be.
countermanded by the story of Sisyphus himself.
I got 2 of
Sisyphus
those.
is immortal. What makes his life absurd
So let's
is
see.
the fact that
That's
he's
36
condemned
ounces,
to a lifetime
right?
of
These are 12-ounce grenades, I
futility.
think. Yes.
But if that lifetime of futility, in fact, is an immortal lifetime, going on for all eternity, I think we would agree that that makes it not less absurd, but rather more absurd. One might say that
And
it's
yep,
kind of blessing
they're
in
pretty
life
cool.
that we don't get a chance
Although it
to
is
get totally bored.
nice,
And there's
60
been several
degrees here.
interesting attempts to
It
draw
feels
sketches of immortality.
About 10 degrees
which
colder
the
out here in the garage
inevitable
for some
outcome
reason.
is, at a certain point, boredom, futility, a sense that it's just the same thing over and over again, a thesis that we'll see come again when we talk about Nietzsche. But the idea that death leads to the absurd gives rise to another consideration too, that there's a sense in which we expect our
The
lives
burps
to
aren't
add
coming
up
in
to
as
something.
easily.
And as Ecclesiastes in the Old Testament
Oh,
tells
fuck.
us, quite bluntly, this is the vanity of vanities.
Man,
It doesn't.
I can't control my
And what
touchscreen with
Sisyphus
gloves on.
and Ecclesiastes both give us is a picture of life
Don't
where
get
we
it.
have all of our aspirations and
Just do it that
ambitions,
way.
our joys and our achievements, but ultimately, in the end, it amounts to nothing. That's the absurd. There's another sense in which Camus takes as his target the whole of the scientific worldview, the idea
Oh, yeah.
of objectivity. The thesis basically is that it's only life, only one's
Already starting to
personal
feel the pressure.
experience that really counts.
Quattro.
He points, for example, to Galileo, a funny figure in the history of science, one of its great geniuses, but in terms of his turmoil and opposition to the church, about which a great deal has been written,
What the
Camus
fuck?
says, in a way, he did the obvious. He was justified. Given a choice between life and truth, the obvious choice is going to be life.
Believe it.
What's more,
Or not.
science in general gives us a view, which one recent philosopher has called the view from nowhere. It's the idea of an
Believe it or
impersonal,
not, this is number 5.
objective truth. I remember when I was in elementary school, on the bulletin board of my classroom, there was a picture of the solar system. And this course made me very excited. But in retrospect, I now ask myself, from where was this picture depicted? What is the perspective? And the answer, I think, is from nowhere in
That
particular.
must mean we're about 8 minutes in.
And when you look at this picture of the solar system, I remember as a little kid, someone would point to the third rock from the sun
Starting to catch the buzz,
and
boys.
say, that's us.
Sorta.
And of course, even on a poster 6 feet wide, it was virtually a dot. And this vast expanse surrounding it. And even then, I remember the feeling. It makes you feel awfully small. And then, of course, I learned about galaxies. And now, of course, we have these marvelous photographs of
Ah.
our galaxy
Shouldn't have ate all that
And
KFC.
galaxies.
Goddamn.
beyond. And there's a sense in which, taking up this picture of the world, one feels infinitesimally insignificant.
Fine malt liquor.
Or looking at the timeline of the universe, 15 billion years, of which, 9, 10 billion years there's been some form of life. The dinosaurs, mere 165 million years ago. Human beings, depends exactly what you measure from, but a couple 100,000 years. What we call history, at most 5,000 years.
Cinco.
America, 200 years. My generation, 50 years. You look
When
at
you go.
a list, a timeline of the universe,
Can you do it?
and you feel,
I think so.
I feel so insignificant. I'm just a dot on a dot on a dot on a very small space. If you take a scientific
What the fuck is
worldview,
it?
Of course, what you're supposed to do is take an objective view. You're supposed to, in a sense, erase yourself. Scientific papers always proceed. In this experiment, it is proven that.
Record time.
Like that. It's not.
Well, this is not going to be no kind of record time.
It doesn't really matter. It isn't supposed to matter. And yet Camus says,
time is
the
anyway.
only thing that matters, the only thing that is truly
Oh no, we're over the 10-minute mark.
Personal experience. There's another way he approaches the absurd, and of course this fits the Sisyphus story quite nicely. We're rational, and part of what it means to be rational is that we ask the question, why? Sometimes this is a quest for an explanation, in science, for example. Sometimes it's a quest for a justification, for example, in ethics. But the interesting and upsetting thing about why-type questions, as anyone who has a 3-year-old child knows all too well, is that the questions keep coming. Why is this? Here's an answer. Well, why is that? Here's an answer. And as any parent knows, the parent's knowledge gives in long before the child.
Sounds like doing a 2 and 10 video.
The whys. The truth is that this chain of reasoning, this chain of explanation, or in ethics, the chain of justification, has no final anchor. If you're thinking, for example, about why you do what you do, you might come up most of the time with an answer, if I do this, that'll help me get that. Why do you want that? If I get that, then that'll help me along to getting this. And the questions go on until finally you're driven to some
here it is.
end point.
Swill,
where
swill.
You say, well, because it gives me pleasure. Or because it'll make me happy. And then, of course, the fatal question. What's important about pleasure? Why do you want to be happy? And you're stuck. And, of course, there are lots of philosophers, particularly in the Christian tradition, who have asked very seriously about why pleasure or happiness should be a final
5 and 1.
There's a sense in which justification runs out. So, too, in science.
That's the Mickey six-pack.
Understanding runs out.
And that's for you.
Understanding the universe.
slickmtz80. doughboiijr. Shout out to you guys.
Will
it's hard
never
work, gentlemen.
Give us satisfaction. Because the truth is, the absurd is with us. The absurd is this confrontation.
No, it's a long one.
If
you're stuck by this far.
And the indifferent universe.
If you're stuck on.
And within that context,
if you hung in there this long.
becomes a problem.
Props.